This is episode 165 of the Andrew Hines Real Estate Investing Podcast. Welcome to episode 165 of the Andrew Hines Real Estate Investing Podcast. Today I have Seth Ferguson on the show, and this episode was a lot of fun. I mean, they all are, but this one was specifically interesting because it's a Canadian investing in the US. Again, Seth Ferguson was on the show, and he talked about buying large-scale multifamily between 100 and 300 units south of the border, how he started funds and syndicated his investments, raising funds in both Canada and the US, and some of the details that surround that and how that's done. So this is a lot bigger scale investing that we typically have talked about on this podcast. And it was just so fascinating. Seth's actually hosting a Canadian real estate multifamily event in Toronto. And he shared the link with me. He said that he's going to pass a discount code on to the people who check out this podcast. So if you check out multifamilyconference.ca with a promo code Hines, you'll get, I'm told you'll get a discount on that. There's no compensation to me for sharing that with you. I'm just sharing that with you as information. So definitely check that out if you're interested in multifamily, but more importantly, check out this episode and hear what Seth has to say. He really is a wealth of knowledge, and I'm sure there's a lot that's going to be learned. Once again, I just want to recommend, if you are new to investing or new to this podcast, go right back to episode 1 and work your way through. The fundamental knowledge learned in those first 10 to 20 episodes is really a great foundation to build from. And it's highly recommended. I know the people who have done that have greatly appreciated the experience and have benefited because of that. And I get a lot of feedback saying as much. One last request, as usual, please just take a moment to hit the like, subscribe, and notification bell and leave a comment if you're watching on YouTube. And if you're an audio listener, please leave a rating and review. 5 stars would be greatly appreciated, just to help more people find the show and help it help more people. So without further ado, let's jump into episode 165 with Seth Ferguson. Hello and welcome to the Andrew Hines Real Estate Investing Podcast. I have Seth Ferguson on the show. And Seth, you have a lot of media that you do. You're a popular guy. But for those who don't know you, can you give me the backstory?
It's all not true.
Yeah.
It's all made up. No, yeah. People see me all sorts of places. Like in the GTA, I've got a cable TV show called Real Estate Simplified that we do. We've got a YouTube channel talking about multifamily investing, ran a podcast for 3 years. And then we've got a huge conference coming up called the Multifamily Conference. So if you're searching for real estate, you've probably seen my face at least somewhere on the internet.
The interesting part is that I didn't even know you had the TV show or the podcast until we met through Erwin, obviously.
Yeah.
And that's why it's good to run in these circles, and you meet really cool people, as you've put it.
Yeah. When you get back, we'll have to have you on the TV show.
Yeah, that'd be cool, man.
Yeah.
I'm not sure when that's going to be. We're going to enjoy the warm weather for a while, yeah, and then figure that out. But yeah, could you tell me a little bit about yourself? Just, I mean, as an investor, like, tell me where you're at now, and then let's dig into a little bit about how you got there.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm a reformed single family home investor. So like what happened was, before real estate was even in the picture, I was trying to make the NHL as a hockey referee. That's what I was doing. I was in the States doing it full time, working a whole bunch of different leagues. And then I came back. I'm still wanting to pursue my hockey ambitions, but I needed a real job. So I figured, hey, real estate agents, they set their own hours. They'll be so easy to do hockey and sell houses at the same time. So I went and got my real estate license. My dad owned a brokerage at the time, and started working there. And, I was making good money, what most people would consider really good money. But what I realized is, like, as fast as the money was coming in, it was going out just as quickly, to, like, I had the nice car and all that stuff because I was, dumb in my 20s. So I realized I needed to have something left over. And then I started reading books like Rich Dad, Poor Dad, started really educating myself about the investing side of real estate. And I just figured, at the end of the day, I know that product better than anybody else because I was selling it on a daily basis. So I started acquiring single family homes. And then I got to a point where the scale did not work any. It was like I was banging my head against the wall trying to scale it. And then I realized I needed to make a switch. So we can go into that a little bit later on, but that's kind of a bit of a backstory in terms of how I got started in real estate.
So how long ago was it, like your first property purchase as an investor?
Oh boy, that was a long time ago.
You don't look that old, so you must be doing something right.
No, well, I got the gray hairs. So if
dude, I got way more.
yeah, kids will do that to you. Like waking up at 3 a.m. to quiet crying baby, it will put gray hairs on your head. No, I'm how old am I now? I'm 35 now. Pretty scary, eh?
Oh, we're the same age, man. Yeah.
Very scary. No, it was I can't even remember. I was like in my
10 plus.
I think I was in my late 20s.
Okay.
I can't honestly, I don't even remember the year. I remember what it was. It was a duplex conversion, but I can't remember the year.
Okay. And now you're into multifamilies, right? Like, so you kind of got through the scale of the singles, realizing that they don't scale easy with retail banks. You have to get into the commercial side of things.
It was so tough because you're showing good income on paper. But what a lot of people will realize, and I'm sure like you hear this all the time, if you're acquiring single family homes in a hot market, the cash flow is almost non-existent. So you're equity rich, cash flow poor, but that doesn't look good on paper. So you may have 300 grand in equity, but you've got zero cash flow. And, I remember one year, the drain out to the sewer got busted through by a tree branch, and that was like $8 grand to replace it. Yeah. So that wipes out 3 or 4 years of cash flow with that one property. And it's like, okay, the turning point for everything was when my son was born, Callan. I'd been struggling trying to grow and scale for a while. And as soon as he was born, I'm not sure if you had the same experience, but like you hold your kid for the first time and then like your life instantly changes and you want to like do more and be better. Like for your new baby, that's kind of the instant change I had. So then I started thinking, okay, well, I know real estate is the right asset to buy because I made more money with the real estate investments than I ever had with like working like for like an hourly or a salary. But it was just single family investing was not the right niche or niche. So I started looking at office, industrial, retail, and multifamily. And multifamily made a whole lot of sense. It was, I looked at how it performed in downturns, incredibly stable. It outperforms all the other asset classes I just mentioned. You just look at the past 3 recessions, and it was something I really understood because of my residential sales background and my single family background. So all the boxes just kind of started getting ticked, and I'm like, you know what, this is what we're going to do.
And I think multifamily makes a lot of sense to a lot of people in this audience. Yeah. And you don't have to really think about it too difficult. I mean, everyone always needs a place to live. And the more basic of housing, like a multifamily complex where the apartments are very basic, they're not as frilly as like a single family home or a nicer, condo apartment. Those are going to be the ones that are always going to have renters because people who are in the higher income brackets will, maybe shift down to a cheaper place and they're still in yours, right? Of course, if you're on the high end, then the people who are in the high end bracket might now say, nah, I don't want to pay for that anymore. So I like the idea of basic housing. This idea of like buying trailer parks has recently been on my mind. And I'm like, that's even more basic housing. Like you just pull up your trailer and you can stay there. Maybe not so good in Canada though, for year round living, but certainly down south.
Yeah, I've got a lot of friends who are doing like some mobile home parks. A bunch are in self storage, but like I don't want to get your video demonetized on YouTube. So I'll just say, with what's happened over the past couple of years, I think it's been very apparent. Like what really matters to people. People had to close up their offices, they had to close up their retail businesses, but like you said, everybody still needs a place to live, and that's the last thing to go. So if you're, you could have empty offices, but people will still be at home and they're still paying, their rent to you if you're a multifamily owner.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, multi makes a ton of sense at a concept level. The problem now, as you're likely aware, is the price point. People stop talking about cap rates. Now they're just talking price per door, and that number is going up and up. It's probably becoming, and I haven't run the current, what do I have to pay per door in Hamilton, say today? But I think that it's pretty hard to have cash flow if you're going to go full 75% financing. Well, you wouldn't even get 75% financing conventionally.
Yeah. Like, and we could talk for hours about, the impact of rent control and everything. Like, I'm a big value add proponent. Ontario is an interesting market. It's incredibly hot. And then plus we have the added layer of rent control. So we've got a couple of things we have to stick handle through for sure. So
where did you focus? Like what markets have you focused on? And then what markets are you looking at now?
Yeah. So I actually went south of the border to look as opposed to staying in Ontario. I mentioned rent control. That's a big one for me. If you're going to employ the value add strategy, I believe if you're an investor risking capital in the market, you should be able to receive an appropriate return. Rent control stifles that. And in my opinion, I think there's a number of studies have shown this. It actually makes the price of living worse for tenants with rent control. But I wasn't a fan of that. So we primarily hunt in Florida and Texas. There's a number of markets there that we're aggressively pursuing. We've looked at some deals in Oklahoma and some other states. But yeah, like I'm a huge fan of the southern states. You look at the huge demographic shift occurring right now in the US. People are fleeing the coast. So, California, New York, they're going where the jobs are and where we have a more realistic tax policy. So, you're seeing everybody leave. So Arizona is popular. Texas is popular. Florida is popular. And there's so much growth happening in those markets. GDP is on fire. Job creation is through the roof. And I think for the next 20, 30 years, we're going to be riding this wave in those states because, my opinion is you can't tax a state into a state of financial prosperity, which is what's happening in California. Like you can't just levy taxes to try and fix an issue, and I think people are recognizing that and leaving and setting up shop elsewhere.
What was the Ronald Reagan quote? The most terrifying 9 words you can hear is "I'm from the government and I'm here to help."
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, minimum wage backfires because you can't, it's similar as rent control. You can't dictate what a worker's worth. Like if minimum wage is $14 and a worker's only worth 12, that doesn't make you pay that $12 worker 14. That makes you tell that $12 worker to go home and hire a machine or a foreigner to do it. I mean, no one's going to pay more than someone's worth. It's ultimately what it comes down to. So all these policies tend to backfire. I agree with you. So if you find states where the policies make sense and the ideology makes sense, then I think what you're kind of getting at is that there seems to be a longer term horizon of economic prosperity, or seemingly. No one can predict anything for sure, but
yeah, for sure. And then you look at just the more of the nuts and bolts type of stuff. Mm-hmm. In Ontario or BC, if a tenant stops paying you, it's a long process to get them out if you have issues. Mm-hmm. In a market like Texas, it's relatively easy. So, and a lot of people, and we've had huge debates on the TV show about this, but I find in the media, most people take the side of the tenant being evicted. But what about the 99.9% of the other tenants who want a safe place to live, mm-hmm. who want to have a great environment? If there's one bad apple, they should be removed for the benefit mm-hmm. of the community. I don't know why we're fighting so hard to keep bad apples in a place where it's just, lowering the experience and the happiness of everybody else involved.
Right. Yeah.
So, and for those, we could go on forever about it, but I like it. Yeah.
I like a little bit of the, the ideological discussion because it's important. If people wrap their head around this, then more people, I guess will vote in a way that, makes things better for everyone.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So, I mean, since you brought it up, what are evictions like in Texas and Florida? I've heard little bits, but get your take on it.
Yeah. So basically, for Canadian, most of your listeners are Canadian, right?
Yeah, we're primarily Canadian
Okay.
audience.
So the best example in Canada would be it's more like Alberta, right? In Alberta, you have a lot, like Alberta's like Canada's Texas almost. So you have a lot more, there's no long red tape process to follow. Obviously you have to give your notice and everything, but if you don't pay, you give notice and then sure enough, you are evicted.
So is it like a 15-day from when they don't pay, or a month within a month of when they don't pay?
Yeah, you know what? Off the top of my head, I can't even remember because we use like our management company deals with all that stuff.
Yeah, you don't even get involved, right? So
that's a good question. I should probably just Google it real quick. And I'll have a
See, I actually kind of like that you don't know, because why should you, right? You know that it's favorable, but the nuts and bolts. That's why you hire management.
Yeah.
To know the forms, to know how to do it. I have heard varying stories, but I do believe it's like in less than a month in Florida. I'm not sure about Texas, but I can't imagine it'd be much different there.
Yeah, I don't want to tell you a number and be wrong. But
of course.
It's relatively quick as opposed to the months and months and months and months in Ontario.
Okay. And what type of so in Florida, for instance, are you buying in Tampa, Orlando, Miami? All of the above?
So we've got a sweet deal in Orlando, and it's basically like a resort. So it's right on a lake. So we've got like kayak rentals there. You can rent like paddle boats to go out, but you're living there full time. So it's amazing. But yeah, so we're aggressively hunting. Tampa is a big market. DFW, Dallas Fort Worth. We're looking in Austin. We have our own criteria that we follow in terms of which markets we're going to look at. And then obviously you take that macro market and you go down to the submarket. We always look for, where's the closest Kroger store? Where's all the banks? Where are all the nicer restaurants? That sort of thing. When we're looking at a location.
What's Kroger's?
Oh, it's like a grocery store.
Okay.
Yeah.
Down here, it's Publix. It's
Publix. Yeah. So all those things, you're looking, where's the Starbucks, right? As opposed to Tim Hortons, that sort of thing.
So that's what you're kind of looking for. I mean, I hear so many people reference like, where's Walmart or Lowe's putting their new location? Yeah.
100%. Right. Because, you want to have all the amenities there. People don't like to travel and drive to go places. So if you can acquire a property that's close to everything, great standard of living, walkability is a big thing as well. That's whether you're buying a place to live or you're renting a place to live, you're looking at the same stuff. Like, how is this going to impact my life? I want to be close.
Yeah. And you're doing multifamily. So there's a lot of working class people that maybe don't even have their own cars, right? So some of them want public transit, stuff along those lines. I mean, class wise, what would you say you're typically buying? Is it a class C, B?
No. Yeah. So like, we're really going for like, B minus, like a C plus kind of thing. And we're really looking to take it to like a B plus.
And could you just break that down a little bit about, how you determine it to be that? I mean, I know there's some subjectivity there, but what you would do, give me an example and what it is to start and then what you would do.
Yeah, for sure. So like, a C plus, B minus, you're probably looking at 90s to late 80s vintage, depending. And like you said, the classes are very subjective. So one person's B minus may be another person's B plus or C plus.
It always made me feel confused when people talked about it. I'm like, am I missing something? Who has the rubric for this?
There is no rubric. So, and that's why, one thing when people first get started is they're like, oh yeah, the broker's telling me it's a B plus. Well, it's like, okay, well, have you seen it yourself? Because, what one person calls it will be very different. Yeah. But I'm going to speak very generally because we have to take into account the vintage of the property, the year it was built. We also have to take into account deferred maintenance. Has it been renovated? Because, for instance, we could have a early 90s construction, but that has undergone a complete renovation. It wouldn't be a B anymore. Like, it would probably be an A if everything was redone. So it's very subjective, but generally speaking, you're looking at late 80s, early into the 90s for a B asset. In a C asset, you're going to be, early 80s, even late 70s. And then A, we're getting into the 2000s. And double A, you're always looking at location as well. So a double A property, prime location, brand new construction, the best amenities offered. And that's your top tier of property. Right. Yeah.
And you said you're going from C plus, B minus, up a half a grade.
And there's four types of strategies, right, for investing. You've got core plus, value add, and opportunistic. I'm a big fan of the value add strategy just because it has a good balance between the risk involved and the returns. With the core strategy, you're acquiring that double A property in the best location. It's brand new. There's nothing to do. You just buy it and you sit on it. Core plus, you're doing some minor stuff. Value add, you're going in physical renovations, operational efficiencies. So, maybe changing out some of the staff, changing the branding, driving up that NOI, doing, exterior, interior renovations, that sort of stuff. I think that's, to me at least, that's the best balance between risk and return. Opportunistic, when you're buying, totally empty assets or like 30% occupied, the risk goes through the roof. And for me, that's not my cup of tea, though I know people who are doing quite well.
Depends on how big, right? Like how big are we talking? If it's 100 units and you got 30% occupancy, I'd say that's pretty darn risky. There are people that'll do it, right?
Well,
I mean, I guess if you have proof of concept and you have the money to float it until you get it done, or you can move fast enough to get a rentable.
It all depends on what you're dealing with. Like with that type of property, you're going in almost all cash at that point, and the clock starts ticking. With the value add, generally speaking, like you're going to be able to get conventional financing, like conventional debt on the deal. And depending on how you do it with the bridge, you can usually take advantage of everything a bridge offers you. You can finance some or all of the renovations as well.
Yeah. So you're going to add in like institutional to finance those renovations, or you're going to add in some sort of secondary financing to cover that?
Yeah, a lot of people now just with the way rates are, like they'll acquire the property with a bridge loan, and then change out of that in a couple of years once they've gone through their value add process. Right. And with the bridge, you can add in some of your renos.
Yeah. Well, you're kind of referring to sort of private or semi-private money, right? Yeah. I hear that terminology. It's just a little bit different down here in how people refer to it. Yeah. But, okay. So, are you early on in your process of buying down here, or have you got quite a few under your belt now?
Yeah. So in the grand scheme of things, like for instance, at the conference, we've got a guy on stage who's almost at 2 billion in asset value management. Yeah. Almost 2 billion. I am a very, very small fish compared to that. A very small fish.
I think everyone listening to this is a very small fish compared to that.
Yeah. So there's no way. However, we're aggressively hunting for deals. Like the plan is after this conference, we'll go on a bit of an acquisition, not a binge, but we're going to be seriously looking at doing a couple deals. Yeah.
So conceptually, if we're talking about doing a value add project, you're going to find something that's probably 90% plus occupied, and it's going to need work on the individual units, and you're going to allow natural turnover to happen, or are you going to force some turnover yourself?
Yeah, it's all on a deal by deal basis. Like it really depends. For example, you may have a property where it's being mismanaged and you have some bad apples in there. You're going to go in and get them out to start to affect the just the feel of the property and everybody involved. And typically when you have that happen, the other residents will tell you point blank who the problems are, because they don't want them living where they're living anyway. But for instance, you could even be in the high 80s for occupancy and still get conventional debt on the property. Once you get below that, generally going to some other type of debt product. So you could bridge it or something like that.
And I mean, I'm sure you can make sense of that. You just have to adjust your price that you're paying if you're going to pay private money or expensive money on that.
Well, and I just want to clarify, like a bridge loan is not private funds.
So it doesn't need to be private. Well, I guess it could be, but you're getting institutional bridge loan?
Yeah. So a bridge loan is really quite simply, it's like a short-term product. So you're paying more for the money, but the terms are more flexible. Like it's not a Fannie or a Freddie. So you're able to go in with a higher, more leverage. And the terms are more flexible in terms of, your debt service coverage ratio and all that sort of stuff. So it gives you the freedom, obviously in exchange for, the price you're paying for the money. But it allows you to go in, do your business plan for 2 years. And then the goal is to roll that into some sort of conventional debt, like a Fannie or a Freddie.
Okay. So when it's a bridge loan, then, so you can do institutional, what kind of qualification requirements? Is it all based on projected income? And are they ballooning a payment at the end, or are you paying consistently throughout? How's that all work?
Yeah. So you're paying you have your payments consistently through, but it's let's say you do a 2-year term or a 3-year term, you've got that balloon at the end that you have to, that's why you're going to roll it into conventional. But yeah, like it's a lot more tailored to the specific situation, right? So if you have a property that's teetering on unstabilized, let's say, so, maybe you're just barely breaking even, but you're going in with a solid business plan to, turn things around, and you have a solid team. A bridge lender is going to look at that and say, okay, we're okay with the risk involved in loaning the money because of X, Y, and Z or X, Y, and Z. This is what we're willing to do there.
Okay, good to know. So would these be the same companies that will do bridge loans as will do conventional financing? Or is it different lenders altogether?
You're going to have some different lenders. You can have, you can work with some smaller community banks. Mm-hmm. Things are a little bit different in the US than with Canada. So you can deal with the more national lenders, or you can deal with smaller community type of banks. And depending on the property, you might end up getting a better, a better product from a community bank because they know the area and they understand what you're doing.
Yeah, similar to like our credit unions in Canada. They just know those areas better. And just for anyone listening, Fannie and Freddie, you're referring to basically government programs.
Yes,
or government insured loans. So they give you better deals.
Just like CMHC, right?
Yeah, exactly. Same concept. Yeah. Just other side of the border. So is that typically your strategy? You're typically going in, and once you've got the building improved, you are going for that government sponsored or the government insured debt.
That's the best kind of money you can get. It's you can't beat the rates. Similar to somebody going CMHC now. They've got their criteria, but once you get it, like it's the cheapest money you can get. So I think that's everybody's goal, is to roll into conventional, and then you just ride it out until you hit your targets, and then you'll sell.
Okay, so you start conventional in an ideal world. You slowly turn some units over in an ideal world, maybe force a few out if they're bad apples. And as you get your rents up and you can satisfy the cap rate requirement or the loan to value requirements, that at that time you will go back and do the government sponsored or the government insured debt.
For sure. And, I wouldn't put it like we just gradually let the units turn. Like you want to condense your value add period to, 12, 18, 24 months. Because, if you're going for that, the ultimate debt, like that government backed type of loan, you want to have your property like running, like all pistons firing. So you're going to acquire the property, do your value add for, 18, 24 months, do everything you can do. And then you're going to put on that long-term debt. If you do everything right, you've got a higher valuation now because you've driven that NOI. And maybe you've moved it from a C plus to a B. And that's going to put you in a different cap rate bracket. You can return some money to the investors at that point, and then you can ride it out.
That's a good segue into what I wanted to ask you next is what's your typical structure? Are you syndicating this between investors for your down payments? Are you coming in with private money for your down payments? Combination of all the above? Tell me about it.
Yeah, syndication is a beautiful structure. Because what it does is it allows passive investors to pool their funds and invest in a high quality real estate asset and get all the benefits of ownership. For instance, one of the common misconceptions is when people are doing some smaller deals, they'll do a JV agreement, a joint venture, and the person who's maybe signing on the loan or maybe just providing the capital, they think they're passive. But what a lot of people don't realize is if something goes wrong, their risk is unlimited in that deal. So if the person swinging the hammer goes under, the lender's coming after the other party because they're 100% active. Their risk is unlimited. But what syndication does, as well as like a fund structure, it provides a limited risk to the passive investors. So, just like with any investment, you're risking your invested capital, but your risk exposure stops there. It's the person running the deal called the sponsor who's shouldering the bulk of the risk. So it's a much better way for somebody to invest their money in real estate, just with all the protections the structure affords.
Yes, you're saying that it skips the liability. You contribute your funds, and those are at risk, but there's no liability beyond that.
Exactly. It is it's a much more prudent way to go about deploying your capital for sure.
So is this, the digging into this a bit more, is this like an exempt market product that you offer to Canadians or to Americans? Are you raising the money in Canada and then deploying it in the US?
Yeah, so we've got investors on both sides of the border. It is through the exempt market, and we work with accredited investors. And if somebody's not sure what that means, it just means that you're meeting some criteria set by the government. So $200K a year as an individual, $300 as a couple, or you can have $1 million of net assets, not including your primary residence. Basically what happened was back in the 30s, people were getting swindled by traveling salespeople selling stocks that did not exist. So the government instituted rules to make sure that if somebody was investing in securities, they had the resources to acquire suitable counsel, get the proper advice, and not get swindled. That's where this came about. But that was a bit of a tangent, and I totally forget.
No, it's good. No, yeah. We're talking about so an exempt market product. So yes. You are raising through an EMD in Canada, is that right, or do you raise outside of that?
No. So in the US, as long as you're, we'll use like a 506B, for example. So you've got two different offerings. You've got a 506B and a 506C. A 506C means that you can publicly advertise your deal, but you can only work with accredited investors, and you have to have that verified. So most people will have a third-party verification of the accredited investor. That allows you to work in the exempt market and advertise your deal. 506B, on the other side, you can work with some unaccredited but sophisticated investors, but you're limited in that number, and the bulk of your investors must be accredited. But you cannot advertise your deal. So it all has to be through people you already know in your network. If, let's say, for example, we're doing a 506B deal, we can't run a Facebook ad campaign. We can't run a YouTube campaign. We can't get a billboard saying, hey, this is my deal, come invest. We would be breaking a whole bunch of rules and laws. But if somebody's already on our mailing list and we know they're an accredited investor, as soon as we have a deal, it's like, hey, listen, this is the deal we have coming up. This is what it looks like. Do you think you might want to invest in this? And that's how you would raise capital for a 506B offering.
Okay. So you've got those two different options out of the US, and you're raising in Canada as well?
Oh, absolutely. So a lot of people don't realize that you can actually raise money from the exempt market in Canada on your own. If you're a business, you can raise capital from your friends, from your family, from other accredited investors, as long as you don't exceed. And I think off the top of my head, I think it's what's the max number? I think it's 30 or 35 people. I may be wrong on the exact number, but a private business can go out and raise capital and be totally exempt. It's right. When you start,
can't advertise it.
Yeah, so very similar. Like the securities laws are very similar in Canada and the U.S. Like there's many differences. Like you've got an overarching federal level in the states, and then you have the state laws. In Canada, it's a provincial thing, but it's all very similar no matter which side of the border you're on.
Okay. And so if you want to scale that up in Canada, then you have to do the actual, I guess, offering memorandum if you wanted to be able to do that and advertise it in Canada.
Yeah, for sure. And you know, the way we're kind of going now, like we've got a pretty healthy split, you know, between US investors and Canadian investors. So, you know, there will be a point in time where we, you know, exceed everything. But until then, you know, that's how we're operating.
Now, the interesting thing that's kind of worth talking about is if you get Canadian investors, they've got this cross-border tax obligation. Yeah, because you want to do like an LP for a Canadian, you want to be invested in an LP in the US because then you get the flow-through tax treatment. And this is not tax advice, so anybody confirm with your accountant, but this is my understanding.
Yeah.
How have you been addressing that? Because you don't want your investors to have to file American taxes if these are people that just want hands off, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I'm really glad you brought this up because no joke, probably like every day, somebody sends me a message asking about this. And we run a webinar on this very topic. And almost every time we run it, somebody comes on and they've already invested in an LLC. And you end up getting double taxed. So I'll just touch on real quick. I'll do a brief summary for people who have no idea what we're talking about right now. The most popular entity in the US is called an LLC. And anything you read on the internet about US investing, everybody will say LLC is the way to go. But if you're a Canadian, what happens is CRA, the Canada Revenue Agency, does not recognize the LLC. So you do not get any credit for taxes paid you know, on the south side of the border. So you're going to get banged on the US side and you're going to get banged on the Canadian side. So you effectively pay double tax. So what CRA does do is they recognize and they will give you credit for an LP structure. Different from when we're talking about a syndication where we have the general partnership and the limited partnership, GPLP. It's still called a limited partnership, but it's different than the GPLP within a syndication. And so with like the setup is very, very, very similar, minor changes in verbiage and titles, but it runs very much the same as an LLC, but you're able as a Canadian to get credit for everything you've paid, and then everything can flow through and you're not paying double tax, which would obviously ruin or significantly impede an investment.
Now, the bummer there is that now, if you're a Canadian and invested in an American LP, now you got to file US taxes if you're treating it as a flow through, right? So that's the only. Now, is there a way that you've come up with to simplify that for your investors?
Yeah, like it's all about getting the right accountant with cross-border experience. Like we get every week somebody asking, being like, hey, like, you know, I'm interested in investing. You know, my accountant doesn't really know what they're doing with this because you have to go to a specialized. So we have referrals we make to people that we know well who understand the cross-border side exceptionally well. The other thing to take into consideration is the tax holdback. And what that basically is the U.S. government, you know, if you're bringing money back to Canada, they want to make sure the government wants to make sure that you pay taxes in the U.S. So, you know, about 20% is held back on the U.S. side just to make sure your taxes get paid, and then you file to get the rest back. There is a way to stick handle around this. And that's to set up an entity on the US side. Now, every investor's setup is going to be different because of their needs. But if you, let's say, set up a C Corp or something on the US side, and you have an EIN number, an employment insurance number, that's basically the syndication or whatever it is paying to another US entity. There's no holdback there. And then that entity will then pay into Canada. So you have to talk with a very experienced cross-border accountant and get the right advice tailored for you. But yeah, like there's some ways around it. And like if you're being serious about investing in the US, I would say most of our investors are keeping the money south of the border and reinvesting in other deals. You set it up once, and it's going to pay you because you've already done the heavy lifting. So it's well worth it, and it's not too expensive.
Okay. Very good to know. And that's a worthwhile discussion to have, because I don't think we've deep dove into that one probably since I had the last American focused investor on, and it's been a while. So thanks for sharing that. Now, just jumping back to the properties, like just giving an example, like a recent building you would have bought, are we talking a couple 100 units? What kind of size of building are we typically looking for?
Yeah. So like our criteria is north of 100 and sub like 300. Because what you'll find is if you're in that 50 to 70 unit range, you're not really there where you can have full-time staff. Okay. The property doesn't really support it. Right. And I'm a big believer that the tenants actually have a better product, get a better experience when you have full-time staff there. Yeah. Because like they're talking with the residents all the time, you're on top of things. The leasing agent knows the property like the back of their hand. So you're going to get better, better conversion rates on your lease leads. I think there's a whole lot of benefits to that. So once you get into that, even 90 to 100, that's when you start getting that true economy of scale.
And per unit, like what's acceptable to you right now when you're looking at deals? Like what kind of ballpark per unit price are you paying?
That's really market and some market
specific.
Like you could be 80 grand a door, you could be 170 grand a door. Like it.
And both could be acceptable. Like Tampa would probably be more like the 170, I would think.
Or even 200. Like it's more about it's more about where the delta, like where the property is today and where you can take it. That's what matters most. Not really like buying on a because we could buy like 80 grand a door and you can't do anything to it. There's no money.
Yeah, no, I was just trying to get an idea for ballpark, of spending. So obviously so many moving parts, there's so many tangents we could go down in terms of your due diligence process. I mean, are you tying properties up for X number of days, or are you just firm on the dotted line and you'll figure it out with a good long closing?
Well, the way the market is now, you're putting hard money down on the dot. So, you're putting 300 grand up front and, due diligence. What's due diligence these days? So you really have to do a lot of your work ahead of time because like you can't, unless you're in a very sleepy market, like for instance, in Texas right now, like you are putting down big deposits, like no conditions, like you're closing like very quickly. So that's just the way things are. So, eventually, the market ebbs and flows and, eventually it'll go back the other way. But right now, like you have to be on the ball. Like property goes up, they're doing an offer date and basically you're doing your underwriting, you're talking with your lenders, you're running your models for like the week and a half before offer date, and then you're submitting. And, so sometimes there's a lot. So you just do what you can do.
Okay, so you find a good deal and then you start raising money in the closing period, I'm guessing? That's typically...
Yeah. So you're under the gun if you're following a syndication model. So, and that's why it's so important to have your investors primed before you actually have a deal under contract. So a lot of work goes like in the front end. Like for instance, like you don't want to have a long closing because, let's face it, the property manager knows they're probably losing their job. Everybody involved knows, the owner knows they're selling it. So they don't want to pump you more money into it. So the longer closing, like you can actually have some effects on the property. So you want to keep things nice and tight, but also still have time to do your raise. So, you could raise, some people I know now, like they're closing like very, very quickly, like, 3 or 4 weeks. Others, like you could be a month and a half, 2 months, all depending on the situation. But yeah, it's tight.
Yeah, very interesting, man. We could talk about this for hours. Like there's so many moving parts in this. Do you have like connections on the US side, like that you've partnered with on this, kind of your boots on the ground? Because you live Burlington, don't you? Or in the area?
Oh yeah. I'm in Milton, and Milton. Especially with the way especially with the way like the border was over the past couple of years, like, when everything was closed, there was no way I could, as much as I would love to fly down and just check out a property and fly back, it was not happening. So yeah, we've got guys kind of all over. So if our property's within a couple hour drive, like they'll go check it out, do the FaceTime type of tour for me. And that's been working out. But as things open back up, I'm really looking forward to actually, going back down and seeing everybody who I haven't seen for like 2 years.
Nice. Okay. Seth, where do people find you? Like, where do we send them if they want to learn more about you and what you're up to?
Yeah, well, I would say the best place to find me in the next couple of months is the Multifamily Conference. So that's May 14th and 15th, in Toronto. So they can go to multifamilyconference.ca, and we can actually do a discount code for everybody. We can do why don't we do your last name, Hines?
Hines. Okay. Yeah. Hines.
Yeah. We'll do a special discount code. But other than that, they can find me on YouTube, youtube.com/Seth Ferguson. We publish a new multifamily video every week.
Cool, man. I'll have to check it out. I have not yet seen that. And then of course they can catch your TV show. When do you air?
Yeah. You know what? I don't even know, because like it gets replayed and everything. I have no idea. I just show up and do it. I think it's Tuesday nights.
Gotcha.
That they do it. But sometimes when I'm getting groceries, people will recognize me.
All details. Actually happened to my wife. My wife has a TV show, and we were just, I think we were at Denninger's or something. And somebody looked over and they're like, "You're on TV." Like, oh, it's bound to happen. I get that with the podcast sometimes, actually. They're like, "I know you." So it's weird. Small world, these communities. So anyways, okay, Seth, this was great. There's so much more I could ask you, but we'll save that for round 2. And hopefully a bunch of people are going to hear this and check out your conference.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode. Please make sure to share this episode far and wide. Help it help more people. I really appreciate you tuning in. I'll see you on the next one.